And I noticed everybody around me was kind of going through the motions. They weren't applying themselves. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was being objectively critical of myself, of this is what I was doing. That's why I wasn't making progress. I wasn't actually doing it. I was going through the motions, and I was more focused on entertaining myself through my phone. But for me, most importantly, was that I rediscovered a tremendous amount of time. The thing that we're all going to run out of, the thing that we're just gripping to and holding on to, that is just fleeting and is not going to be there. And I realized, man, I have hours and hours of extra time.
Welcome back, friends, old and new, to another episode of the Plant Fueled Podcast with me, your host and plant-based nutritionist, Callum Weir. On this episode, we speak to the godfather of vegan bodybuilding, Robert Cheeke. Robert has now been vegan 27 years after making the switch in 1995. From then until now, Robert has been on an incredible journey that's seen him go from farm boy to champion bodybuilder, multiple book writer, motivational speaker, just to name a few, and now a New York Times Bestselling author with The Plant-Based Athlete, co-authored with Matt Frazier. We'll delve into farm life, the switch to veganism, the journey to becoming a vegan bodybuilder, what inspired him to start writing The Plant-Based Athlete, how there is no one way to consume a plant-based diet as an athlete, and how to keep motivated in a world full of distractions. I took so much away from this conversation, as I hope you will too. So let's get into this episode of the Plant Fueled Podcast. Robert Cheeke, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Callum. I appreciate the opportunity.
So at the moment, it seems like you're always on the move. So you're always grinding, especially at the moment since launching the Plant-Based Athlete. You seem to be in a new state, signing countless books in what seems like every bookstore in America. It must be exciting to see your book being received so well by such a huge audience.
Yeah, one day I wish I could say that I've been to every bookstore in America. Maybe that should be my goal. I've been to over 100 stores already, and that's primarily over the course of 3 weeks. So sometimes 10, 11, 13 bookstores a day, other times just 3 or 5 bookstores a day, signing books, meeting with the staff, taking photos, interacting with people, showing them a different side of a plant-based diet or veganism than many of them have ever seen before, to be honest. I'm going to mainstream bookstores. It's Barnes & Noble, which is like Waterstones. Right. It's a major bookstore chain. So I go to those as well as independent bookstores. And yeah, I walk in, often with like a Vegan Strong shirt like I'm wearing now, or some sort of vegan message or plant-based message, and, and have my, decent muscle size. And it surprises people to some degree. When I say I'm the New York Times bestselling author of this book, The Plant-Based Athlete, I'd like to sign copies in your store. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. And that's kind of the reason why I do it. So I'm not setting up like, these meet and greet things. So it's not as formal as maybe it appears. I basically just drive to every bookstore that I can find, throughout California, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, kind of the places where I live, and sign books. And I go in there unannounced and sign all the copies that they have. And they oftentimes reorder a bunch of copies just because I'm there. That happened yesterday, even in my hometown where I'm at. They were sold out. I signed 7 books there not too long ago. They're sold out to, yesterday. So they ordered 4 more just because I dropped in. And then I went to another store, signed a couple there. And it's just, it's part of the advocacy that comes with the territory of being an author of a plant-based or vegan book. So I'm embracing it. It was a lifelong journey. Making the New York Times bestseller list is not easy. It's very, very difficult. Most people will never do it. Even most authors will never do it. And it's something that I want to celebrate and embrace, knowing that there's a chance I may never do it again. I certainly hope so, but there's a chance I may never get there again. And before my book becomes old news, or it's not on the shelves anymore, or it's lower on the shelf, or no one cares about it. I want to experience that, something that was a lifelong journey for me, which is a true, authentic part of my story, wanting to be a writer and an author since I was 8 years old in 1988, and taking 33 years to achieve this point is something that I soak it in and absorb it every day.
Amazing. I've seen that it's actually made its way over to England finally. Yeah, but I did manage to get it last year, but I had to find somebody that was willing to go to a bookstore on Reddit, pick up the book and send it to me. Because before that, it was impossible for me to get over here. But I managed to get it in, I think, November time, which I was so happy to read, because it is basically like the manual for just being a plant-based athlete, basically.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that, for those listening around the world, it is a book that's published in North America. So it was really only available in North America, but you could shop through Book Depository, I believe it's called. A Book Depository will ship anywhere in the world. Yeah, you've got to pay extra for shipping and it's more expensive and all that, but it was that, therefore made it available to basically anybody in the world. And I heard people getting the book in Asia and Australia and the UK and throughout Europe, and I think South America as well, perhaps. And so it was fun to see that, people with the book in all these different countries, different parts of the world. And then we also landed 6 international translation deals already. And that's for, I'll try to remember them in order, German, Chinese, Italian, Spanish, Polish, and I'm missing one. What am I missing? I can't believe I normally rattle them off when I'm in a bookstore really quickly, but we're missing one in there. I think German, Spanish, Polish, Italian, Chinese. I don't know. Got me. I can't think of the other one right now. But it is exciting that it's going to be very soon in a bunch of other languages, and we're super excited about that. Oh, Korean. There it is. Korean.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm guessing you didn't expect it to take off so much. It's just being embraced all over the world, from what it seems.
Well, that actually was the hope. We didn't know for sure what it's going to do. Obviously the Game Changers helped pave the way for a lot of this stuff, and before that, Forks Over Knives paved the way for a lot of this stuff. And before that, Brendan Brazier and other plant-based athletes paved the way. My co-author Matt Frazier from No Meat Athlete opened up a bunch of doors. Rich Roll has done his thing. Scott Jurek and Christine Barteros and Fiona Oakes and so many others. And so we had high expectations. We actually set out, Matt and I set out to make the New York Times bestseller list. And we set out to have it translated into a bunch of languages. And it came out, or at least it didn't come out, but we landed the German and Chinese deals before the book even hit shelves in the US. It hadn't even been published yet. And we landed those deals. And then Korean, Italian came next, and then Spanish, and then most recently Polish. And I don't think those are available yet. I've heard it takes 12 to 18 months for the translation and the printing and the marketing and the distribution in each individual country. But I can't wait to get a copy of every single translation and have those on the bookshelf.
It's insane. It's just absolutely incredible. I'm so happy for you, and Matt as well. Because when I first saw the book, I saw it advertised through somebody I follow in America. I was like, I have no idea about this, but I want it and I want it. So I managed to get it over here. And to be fair, it was one of those books I could not put down whatsoever. I was constantly, and I felt like I was always learning as well. There's always something new there that I felt like I didn't know, which was great to kind of keep educating myself as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's one of the things that I really wanted to do with this book. So the thesis of it, if you will, was to tell the compelling stories of the world's greatest plant-based athletes. I was insistent on that component, that, I didn't want it to be this dry book about macro and micronutrients and about meal plans and about diets and about, foods to eat after workout or before workout, or how to build muscle or burn fat. And I'd self-published a bunch of books on those topics already. I'd already written Vegan Bodybuilding and Fitness and Shred It and Plant-Based Muscle. And I wanted this to be different. And so I really wanted that storytelling component, because there are some fascinating stories of athletes who maybe weren't expected to be successful, but a plant-based diet enabled them in very real cases, in some cases, reversing diseases or preventing diseases or overcoming illnesses and things like that, that led to world championships, Guinness World Records, Olympic medals, that kind of thing. A plant-based diet was part of their story. And it was a foundational part of their story. It wasn't an add-on. It was something that encompassed their life, and in many cases enabled them to overcome joint pain and debilitating injuries or autoimmune diseases or eating disorders or other things that allowed them to get back in the game, come out of retirement, and be the best in the world in some cases. And so I wanted to tell those stories, and I think that's what I'm hoping you're referring to as far as not being able to put the book down. That's how I felt conducting these interviews, writing these stories. And so they're not interviews in the book, as you know. It's not like a Q&A. It's not like, okay, a successful plant-based athlete, answer this question. I interviewed them, and then I took that information and told a story out of it. And that's, as a writer, that's what I love to do, is tell stories. And I think I'm a storyteller above all else. And so I'm glad that resonated with you. So thank you.
So I know for a lot of my followers, they already know who you are. But for the newbies or people that don't know your story, let's delve into your early life. You weren't always vegan, but I'm guessing like now it feels like probably a lifetime ago that you made that transition.
Yeah. I mean, I probably made that transition before a lot of people listening were born, because that happened in the mid-90s for me. So I grew up on a farm. I have a very unique background, unique from my perspective, and I think a lot of people would say the same. I come from parents of farming backgrounds. In fact, my father is a world-renowned expert in animal agriculture. He is a retired professor of animal agriculture and wrote about 15 textbooks teaching students and others how to raise animals for food. He traveled around the world to 6 continents while I was growing up, teaching particularly how to raise rabbits for food. But he was a rabbit expert, but also just a general expert in animal science and animal agriculture. And my mother came from the animal science department at the university where my parents met, and both came from farming backgrounds. And I lived on a farm. In fact, I've lived on a farm for more than 20 years. The first 18 years of my life, moved away, came back, moved away, came back, all told, well over 20 years living on a farm with cows, with chickens, turkeys, rabbits, goats, horses, ponies, you name it, ducks, geese, lots of different animals. And that's, it really was that farming background, Callum, that inspired me to not want to eat animals, because I was surrounded by animals that had first names like pets, like maybe a dog or a cat that you might have, or some other domesticated animal. And I was raising them to show at the county fair and then sell in an auction, where I unfortunately had to say goodbye to my friend, who is now going to be turned into somebody's meal. And at age 15 in 1995, that just didn't sit well with me. My older sister was already vegan, and I give her all the credit, for inspiring me. And she did. And she did unequivocally, because she organized what was called an Animal Rights Week at my high school. I was only a sophomore, she was a senior, and I attended these lectures. I watched these videos of factory farming and animal testing. I read literature, I listened to speakers, I talked to people, had conversations, and realized, that contributing to animal cruelty and suffering just wasn't on my priority list anymore. And so I became vegan December 8th, 1995, had no idea how long it would last. Honestly, I gave it a week, because, it's an Animal Rights Week. So you pretend to care about animals for a week and then go back to eating at McDonald's, which is where I was eating, and other restaurants and sandwich shops and pizza places and frozen, hot dogs, corn dogs at home, and beef ravioli and all the things that I enjoyed, bacon and all the things I ate on the farm. And that week, has turned into, I can't do the math. What is it? 1,300 weeks. It's been over 26 years. And, I wondered this whole time. I was a pretty small kid, and that's a big part of my story. 14 years old, 8th grade, I weighed 89 pounds. I Don't know exactly how many kilos that is, 40 or so. Not exactly how many stone it is either, but it's not very many, I'll tell you that. And, I barely weighed over 100 pounds when I entered high school and was playing sports. I was always athletic, played many sports, soccer and basketball, wrestling, track and field, cross country, some other individual sports like tennis that I enjoyed. And I really wondered, can I get bigger and stronger? I mean, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get bigger and stronger, but I was following this vegan lifestyle. It wasn't a diet, of course, it's a lifestyle choice, but a plant-based diet, vegan lifestyle before the internet really came around. How am I going to make this work? But as it turns out, I stumbled at first, of course. I didn't know what to eat. I just knew what I wanted to avoid, and I wasn't eating the healthiest diet, but neither are many teenagers, really. And so I made do with my bread rolls and my pasta and my candy here and there, and things that teenagers eat. And so I made it, and I excelled at a fairly high level as a high school athlete, and was able to embrace a long distance running career in college for 1 year, and just in my own personal life. Outside of the university, I ran lots of races in the community. And so I was a long distance runner. And then, I accidentally stumbled upon weightlifting. I did it a little bit in high school, and I wasn't any good. I was so small, I wasn't good at it. It was too hard for me. And even at the end of my high school career, senior in high school, 18 years old, I wasn't any good at lifting weights. It was too hard. And my friend, my best friend at the time, or one of my best friends at the time, someone I'd known my whole life since preschool, showed me these muscle magazines. You see at the grocery store with like
the big veins and the
exactly. And I was actually, as a kid, I couldn't even look at those. It was just too gross for me. I couldn't look at all the muscles and veins, running through there. It was a turnoff. Like I'd see them at the grocery store and be like, nah, that's not for me. But at this point in my life, I'd been vegan for years. I wanted to get bigger and stronger. And I wanted to show people that now I was 4 or 5 years into veganism, that you could build muscle without eating animal protein. I looked at the muscle magazine and found some sort of inspiration from it. Like, I want to do that. And so my friend Jordan and I started training together. And sure enough, I started putting on muscle quickly. Again, I had my ups and downs. I stumbled. I've written about that in books and articles, why I failed, largely just not consuming enough calories and expending too many calories. But it all eventually worked itself out. And to this day, I've put on 100 pounds, from 120 pounds to 220 pounds, and won multiple bodybuilding competitions along the way, and competed in bodybuilding for a decade, only to retire and get back into long distance running and lose a bunch of muscle and go all the way down to 165 pounds and have a decent year or two in long distance running, and then get back into weightlifting and build all the way back up to 220. Once again, showing even late in my 30s that I could build that kind of muscle, and now in my 40s. And so that's been a part of my journey. And then writing these books has been something that's been a process along this as well. And I tell people that veganism really, or vegan bodybuilding, I should say, gave me a vehicle to write. I've always wanted to write. What am I going to write about? I wrote children's adventure stories. I wrote poems. I wrote songs. I wrote lots of things, but it was really this vegan bodybuilding lifestyle that gave me a vehicle to tell a different story, the one that I had first person experience in for decades and had transformed my entire life. And so that's what I did, and that's what I've done, and that's where we are now.
It's such a varied amount of different exercises as well, because as you say, you're a long distance runner and then a bodybuilder as well, and then going backwards and forth, and it's so varied, because obviously now you're very muscular. I couldn't imagine you as a long distance runner in any way, shape or form.
And I can't, it's funny, I can't really imagine me as a long distance runner right now. My wife actually just asked me about that, if I, would get back into long distance running, because I've expressed interest in burning some fat or losing some weight. Now that I got up to over 220 pounds, I met my goal of gaining a full 100 pounds on a plant-based diet. I've shown that you can do this as a vegan. And it's hard. I can tell you, it's hard to run at 220 pounds. I was doing it when we released our book, just to get some cardiovascular exercise and burn some fat. And I didn't make it very far. And I'm someone who could run, more than 20 miles at a time, someone who set a course record in a 3-hour timed race, someone who won races and ran, a 5K at about a 5-minute, mile pace and could run a mile in under 5 minutes and all this stuff. It's hard now. It's difficult. And so it's interesting, to look back and realize that I did that not even that long ago. It was less than 10 years ago when I was having like a comeback to my long distance running career and enjoyed it immensely. But it is comforting knowing that I could do it again. Like I know how that works, and that's what I think a plant-based diet and an understanding of, to some degree, exercise science and the role of consistency, the role of adaptation, the role of showing up, how we use our 1,440 minutes every day, what we make priorities, how our priorities shine through in our actions, all that kind of stuff. I know that I could do it again. I'm about to turn 42 years old in about 2.5 weeks. And running is something I think I will actually return to, because the weightlifting I've been doing since a late teenager, going on 20 something years, it takes a toll over time. It takes a toll on joints, on lower back, on this constant need to consume a certain calorie intake to maintain, a body weight or body mass of sufficient size. Like it takes work, and, work on everything, work on your digestive system, work on, your organs, work on your muscles and tendons and body. And so I think I'm going to try to make the most of this muscle building opportunity in my early to mid 40s, and then probably eventually get back into running again. Something that's just, for me at least, a little bit less strenuous on my body.
So when you actually first got into bodybuilding, or when you first got into it, you went and hit the gym. Was you successful at first on building muscle? Because I know when I first transitioned over, there was various articles and all that all over the internet about what you can and can't do. But obviously back then there wasn't really much internet use, I guess, or how to get adequate nutrition on a plant-based diet. So how was that, going to a gym trying to build muscle without really knowing? Because I'm guessing back then there was tofu and a few other bits and pieces, but there wasn't what there is now.
Right. I mean, to be honest, Callum, I failed miserably at first, but for various reasons, which I'll explain. So I was an endurance athlete, right? So I was transitioning literally overnight from runner to weightlifter, bodybuilder guy. And what really kicked that off, the catalyst for that, was the Bill Phillips Body for Life program. Do you remember that?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, Body Transformation Challenge, incredibly popular in the late 90s and early 2000s, like 2000, 2001, maybe 2002. Very, very popular around the globe. It was this 12-week body transformation challenge. You see the before and after photos, you're like, that could be me. And so that's what really helped me, because prior to that, what I was doing was just figuring it out on my own. Because I loved running and because I loved exercise in general, I was, in addition to now weight training, I was running sometimes 10 or 15 miles a day. I was cycling, riding my bike 20, 30 miles a day. I was doing maybe 1,000 crunches a day, hundreds of push-ups, weightlifting, and wondering why I'm not putting on muscle. Look how many calories I was expending. I was just burning calories like crazy. In fact, I documented it. I documented my workouts, my meals for a whole year, and I gained 1 pound. I mean, it was reason to quit. It was reason enough to give up. I gave it a sufficient amount of time. I gave it a year. I tried hard, and it didn't work. And so I had to think about that for a moment. And that's when I discovered the Body for Life program. And quite simply, that program was based around weight training and only had 20 minutes of cardiovascular exercise and only a few times a week. And it was explosive, like sprinting up hills and or maybe using a rowing machine or something that was explosive. But it was only 20 minutes of cardiovascular training. And the rest of the workouts were weight training workouts, which really only extended to, if I recall, 46 to 52-minute workouts with drop sets, supersets. It was, a handful of exercises with drop sets, supersets, and that was it. You're done in 46 minutes. And in that program, I'm telling you, Callum, and I've written a lot about this, I gained 1 pound in 1 year prior to this. I discovered the Body for Life program, and I gained 28 pounds in 10 months. And not much changed with my nutrition all that much, although actually it did in some ways. The Body for Life program had me eating 6 meals per day. Before I was just eating, whenever, just whenever I felt like. But this was organized, and I was eating 6 meals per day, 3 bigger meals, 3 smaller meals, and I was supposed to focus on protein intake to some degree and that kind of thing. Of course, the program called for all kinds of chicken breast and fish and whey protein, and there was even a brand of whey protein attached to the program, which was a commercial aspect. The book helps the company make money and through selling supplements. But I just did a vegan version of it. I use soy protein powders, I use tofu, beans and rice and lentils and vegetables and and potatoes and broccoli and things like that. And I made it work. And after I gained 28 pounds in 10 months, I thought, well, why not keep going and see if I can become a competitive bodybuilder? Because the Body for Life program was 12 weeks, right? And I actually gained 19 pounds in 12 weeks. And that's why I'm like, man, if I did this in 3 months, let's keep going. And that's where I reached 28 pounds over 10 months. And then I thought, you know what? Let's see if we can become an actual bodybuilder here. And then I put on another 10 pounds and started competing in bodybuilding. And that's what I did for a decade, and had a really enjoyable time, especially finding some sort of moderate success, which was personally fulfilling, to win a couple bodybuilding competitions, to be runner-up 4 times, to, in my entire 10-year career, place slightly ahead of more people than placed ahead of me as a vegan doing it for animal rights reasons, and to bring light and awareness to that cause was something that was really meaningful to me. And I retired at age 29 because I wanted to follow another passion, which was writing. And that's when I set out to write my first book, which I did and published a year later. And then something I've continued to do for the last 12 years is publish books. And that's been my priority, where, I'm in decent shape right now. I'm not in great shape, but it's because I train for the fun of it these days. It's not my number one priority. When bodybuilding or weight training was my number one priority, I did well, right? When running was my number one priority, I did well. When writing was my number one priority, I did well. And to me, that just says a lot about what our priorities are and what we're capable of when we go all in on a specific passion and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to lose a whole bunch of muscle that I worked years to build. I'm going to lose a bunch to pursue running because that's what my heart wants to do right now. I'm going to say goodbye to, feeling really good and confident and muscular and, having these tight sleeves and all this stuff and getting attention that way, because I want to follow my heart and do something else. And same with writing a book. There were times I didn't go to the gym for a while, for a long period of time, even though I was writing a fitness book. But because my passion was there, I was 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, immersed in what I loved to do. And the result was that the book was better than it would have been if I had been doing a bunch of other things at that same time. I just had to prioritize, knowing that I can bounce back. I know how this works. I know how the physical body works to stress applied to it, and adaptation and improvements and all of these things. And sure enough, I got right back into pretty good shape pretty quickly, because I know the types of mechanisms to do. I know the stress to put on the body and the recovery needed and the foods to eat before, during, and after workout to maximize the benefits, which is what we wrote about in our book, of course. And so I follow that. But these days it's just for fun, training for fun. And I'm totally okay with that. I'm okay with, I don't have this obsessive grind that I've got to be, I've got to win a bodybuilding competition, or I've got to win a race, or that I have to be in the best shape of my life on my 42nd birthday. It's kind of irrelevant to me. And so I'm just following whatever my passion is at a given time. And at this very moment, as I'm talking to you, that is once again writing. And so that's my top priority right now. And I train 3 or 4 days a week and enjoy it, then get back to the pen and paper or back to the keyboard and get back to it.
It's all about like mindset, really, isn't it? Just being like tunnel visioned and focused on what you want and what you want to achieve. So how do you keep focused? Because obviously we have so many different distractions surrounding us, whether it be social media, TV, and everything. All those things follow us about as well. I know when I go to the gym, when I look around, I look at people doing exercises, but the majority of these people are still scrolling through their socials, distracted from what they're actually trying to achieve.
100%. Calvin, you're right. It's whatever I've been able to accomplish, big or small, and that's all, dependent on my perception of it, or, whatever. Something very big to me could be very small to somebody else, but it was meaningful and important to me. So whatever I was able to accomplish, big or small, it almost all came down to mindset. And these are some things that I just happened to learn when I was a young boy. I mean, even as a teenager, I understood a lot of these things. I understood about where we put our energy and how that's going to influence our actions, and the time invested into a specific craft or talent or project. It's going to pay off through consistency over time due to adaptation. I mean, that's how you learn a foreign language. That's how you learn to write. That's how you learn to read. That's how you learn a sport. It's how you learn art. It's through this consistent application over time without interruption, if at all possible, in order to achieve as fast as possible. So for me, mindset has been the foundation of all of this stuff. In fact, in all of my books, that's a key component. There's always this element of mindfulness and mindset and accountability and self-improvement and all of these things that are inherent in my writing style, because I wouldn't be there. I wouldn't be a champion vegan bodybuilder. I wouldn't be a New York Times bestselling author. I wouldn't be a speaker who's spoken on stage around the world in Asia, Australia, Europe, South America, North America, all these places as a speaker about health, wellness, nutrition, veganism, if it wasn't for these aspects of mindset. And you're right. The reason I said 100% at the start was actually to your comment about the gym. I mean, I go to the gym, and maybe it's the types of gyms we go to. I don't know. But absolutely, most people that I see spend as much time on their phone as they do exercising. And you know why I know that? Because I was one of those people. And I was as guilty as anyone that I'd ever seen. I would always have my phone on me during workouts. I could be in a shoulder press exercise, and like in the middle of the exercise, like literally in the middle of the exercise, I think of a funny thing to post on Twitter, and I'll stop the exercise and I'll make my tweet, and then I'll get back to, and then I'll check notifications constantly to the point that I could be sitting on a machine for 20 minutes. And someone said, "Excuse me, are you still using this?" And I was doing that for a long time, and it did stunt a lot of my progress, as I recognized. And then I did something fairly, it shouldn't be radical, but it's radical in today's world, and that was that I deleted every single social media app from my phone, just completely. I didn't say goodbye on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, or hey, announcing that I'm taking a break, or a farewell post, and all this stuff that's really designed mostly, when we do that, it's mostly for ego and like for pats on the back. Oh, I'm gonna miss you, or keep in touch in some other ways, or don't go away, I missed your post, whatever. Sometimes we're calling out for some sort of affirmation or some sort of feedback from that, because we're all, at the end of the day, we're all striving for significance and to feel appreciated and acknowledged and seen and heard. And that's really the foundation of all this stuff, including a lot of this fitness world. You know, I want to be seen and heard and appreciated for my hard work. Look at my physique. Please comment on it. That's what I need. I need feedback, or else why even do it? So I let go of that stuff. It wasn't easy, but I let go of it. And Callum, I've got to tell you, during that time, my entire vision of the world around me changed, because I was the person that was so obsessive that even just driving my car, you get to a red light, you know, get a red light, you're there for a minute or so. I'd just be looking at my phone constantly. I'm at a red light, and then drive the next red light, look again, you know, the grocery store, waiting in line, look again. You know, even when somebody's talking to me, but I'm already kind of bored, I'm tuned out. I just, let me check something real quick, you know, while they're still talking to me. I mean, this bizarre behavior. And what I discovered was I didn't have that distraction with me anymore. And so I would go out to lunch with friends, let's say, as an example, and my friends would all be on their phones, and I would just be sitting there, just, you know, just present and just looking around me and just noticing things differently. I would go to the gym, and I wouldn't even have my phone on me. I mean, it's not even with me. There's no temptation. And my workouts were better. And I noticed everybody around me was kind of going through the motions. They weren't applying themselves. And that's exactly what I was doing. I was being objectively critical of myself, of this is what I was doing. That's why I wasn't making progress. I wasn't actually doing it. I was going through the motions, and I was more focused on entertaining myself through my phone. But for me, most importantly, was that I rediscovered a tremendous amount of time. The thing that we're all going to run out of, the thing that we're just gripping to and holding on to, that is just fleeting and is not going to be there. And I realized, man, I have hours and hours of extra time that I used to be obsessed with my portable technology that was controlling me. I wasn't controlling it. It absolutely controlled me. During that time, I was on and off of, you know, where I deleted it completely. And some platforms I didn't use for even 13 months at a time, like Twitter. I wrote 3 books during that time. I was the most productive that I'd ever been. I got in the best shape of my life. I was touring around the world. I was enjoying things. I was hiking. I lived in Arizona at the time. I was hiking in the mountains with beautiful, sunny, warm weather, with cactus and wild horses and all the rivers around me for hours a day, because I had the time. I could still dedicate time to writing and to working and all this stuff, but I wasn't distracted all the time. And I'm someone who gets distracted easily. I have a very difficult challenge staying focused, which is why, for me, it's another reason why even being able to write a book is such an accomplishment for me, because it's so hard. It's just so hard for me to stay focused. But one of the most important things that I ever did was to delete all those social media apps. And you know what happened when I came back? I still had the same number of followers. Not much had changed. I even posted on, including really social platforms like Facebook, where it's like your friends, your family, it's like, you know, people a bit closer to you than maybe Instagram or Twitter or YouTube. And so I would post, you know, what I miss. And the most common response, honestly, was not much or nothing. Some people, sure, they got married, maybe their parent died. This stuff happens all the time. And maybe I just missed it. I missed that someone had a baby, someone, you know, maybe a childhood friend, an old classmate that I rarely keep in touch with. Maybe they got married or they had a kid. But I didn't really miss out on a lot. But what I gained was self-control, time, better relationships. I spent more time with my wife. I spent more time with our dogs. I spent more time with particular friends. I spent more time with family. I used to go back home where I'm from in Oregon and visit with my family just once or twice a year, but I'd still be playing on my phone because everyone knows me as like Robert, the internet guy. You know, I sell my books through my phone. And I stopped all that, and I was just present, you know, like just talking to my mom, where before I would get distracted or tune out or like, okay, well, I better go get back to work now. And it changed everything in my life, to the point that I've been wanting to do it again. Now that this book is out and it's already made the New York Times bestseller list, and became a #1 international bestseller, and achieved these things because largely of a specific approach that I already took. I can't wait to go back there. I just, I can't wait to disconnect while also reconnecting with my present self. And so that's something that is important to me, and is, it's a long answer for your question about mindset, but that's what enabled me to actually tap into that creative mindset and discipline and create positive habits, was by, removing this guy.
I completely agree as well, because obviously, like, once you're consuming these very addictive like apps, for instance, I can go on TikTok and 3 hours has passed, but you don't realize it, and it is getting that mindset of, I need to focus, I need to put that down, I don't need to put. So at the moment, especially when I'm working, creating courses at the moment, that I am putting my phone in a separate room for 3 hours, because otherwise I will get distracted. It's just an addiction sitting there waiting to happen, especially with their notifications popping up as well. It's just such an addictive atmosphere these days. Obviously, back, like, you didn't have that back when you were bodybuilding either. So I'm guessing that probably helped you on your way as well to achieving what you had.
I think so. And you hear Arnold Schwarzenegger talk about that. You hear other people talk about it. And part of it is like, oh, you're an old talking head, me or Arnold, or, Ronnie Coleman, or people from a different era, and different, obviously, I'm not equating my talent to those guys. I'm just giving some sort of timeline there. There was a different era of bodybuilding where you didn't have these distractions. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have your phones. And it was just different as far as the training back then. And you hear Arnold and others talk about that these phones don't help you build your physiques, but they can help you build a brand and a following that you never had before. So there's some benefits too. I don't want to say they're all bad. I mean, you can be basically as famous as you want to be because of things like smartphones and social media websites and hard work and networking and applying yourself and all of that. There is one more comment I wanted to make, though, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are very much like you and I, that we run our businesses, our livelihoods, our paychecks are through, in many cases, these platforms. Like, I can't tell you how many friends I have who are vegan coaches, vegan personal trainers, where the absolute vast majority of their clients come from Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. That's just, inbox messages, and they sign them up for training, whatever the case is. And I understand that. And for me, that was always something that I was addicted to as well, that I can't, like, I would tell whether it's important people in my life, my wife, my parents, my family, like, listen, I can't do this, family event or be as present as I want, because this is my life. This is how I pay bills, is through this, through this technology here. I've got to post, I've got to show photos, I've got to share this part of my life. I have to engage with people and all this. And then I realized that was just a story that I was telling myself, because I took a risk and I got off all of those things, thinking that my income would just plummet, just deteriorate, and I would be in big trouble. But what happened was I was able to create so much more high quality content that I shouldn't even say how fast I did this, but I even wrote a 232 page ebook, including multiple times editing it from start to finish in 6 days. That's relatively unheard of. And I tend to be very fast at writing. It just comes naturally to me, like art or painting may come to somebody else. It just comes naturally to me. But there's no way I would have been able to do something like that. And so, I mean, that book was available, I believe, from the time that I started it to the time it was available for people to order in just a couple weeks' time, by the time I had to do all the layout and make it all fancy and pretty and all that kind of stuff. And so those kind of benefits are available as well. It's not like you disappear for a year and all your hard work goes away. No, I mean, I was writing for Forks Over Knives, for No Meat Athlete, for popular websites, and doing other things like interviews and all of that. And all of that was like elevating me or building me up, because I never had time to write for these bigger websites because I was busy doing my own smaller projects just for me, or obsessively posting on Instagram or Twitter or whatever the platform was. And I had this delusion that has to be part of my approach in order to be successful. And even this book is a byproduct of that. So I don't have much of a social media presence, to be honest. I just don't. My co-author didn't even know how to use Instagram. And here we wrote one of the best-selling books in the world in 2021 because we had spent so much of our time off of social media and building things like a newsletter community, or in my case, an in-person community, going city to city, country to country, state, whatever, meeting people who then, when I had something to offer, there was an audience there that was engaged and that cared and that was dedicated and loyal and watched me disappear for a while and watched me focus on what I was really building and was there to support it when it came back. So that's just something for all the influencers and vegan fitness entrepreneurs and all of that. I get it that, TikTok is a massive part of revenue and life, and so is Instagram and YouTube and all that. But it could be one of the biggest things holding you back. There's no way I would be a New York Times bestselling author, which is one of the most proud moments in my life and one of the greatest titles that I'm probably ever going to have. It's so hard to attain and so few people do it. There's no way I would have done it if I had just continued down a path of addiction and distraction. And I had to remove myself from that for large periods of time in order to create my best work. And so I want to just encourage other people to try that. Just try it and give it a week, give it 2 weeks, give it a month, and see what you're able to learn about yourself during that time.
Like I absolutely love that advice, because I know I get consumed very easily by thinking I need to post and I need to engage constantly, but then I am taking away what I could be doing in other places in my life, which I'm guessing this is how obviously the plant-based athlete came about, obviously with Matt Frazier, which is essentially what the Bible on how to be a plant-based athlete, obviously how to optimize your performance and gathering all that information that you need in one place instead of scattered across various platforms and embedded deep in the internet.
Well, and look at some of the athletes we interviewed that are some of the best in the world. They're not on social media all the time. In fact, many of them don't have much of a social media platform at all, but they may be the best women's duathlete in the world. Or they might be, a world record holder in their sport, or an Olympic athlete, or an international champion or world champion, because that's what they're doing. They're focusing their time on doing that. And that's the approach that we took with writing this book. Both me and Matt have had various levels of discipline throughout our lives, both discovering it through personal development and that type of work that we've both been really into, of just, self-help, personal fulfillment, these types of things. And that is something that I think showed itself in this book. And so that's just something that I encourage anyone listening to do, to really start with, okay, this may sound counterintuitive, but what are you naturally good at first? Not what your passion is, but just what are you naturally good at first? Just let's start there and see if that can be something that you are really interested in. And because that's the more likely scenario to be successful than just, okay, I'm going to follow my passion, even if I'm not good at it whatsoever, because that's just a steeper road to climb. That's just harder to do. You could argue which one is more fulfilling, if you're passionate about something every single day, even if you're not successful and you fail over and over and over, but it's the journey, it's the road, it's the struggle, and that fulfills you. Okay, great. But if you can find something you're naturally good at and learn to like it, maybe even learn to love it, learn to be passionate about it, man, that's a much faster road to success. And so I would start there. What are you good at? What do you like? And how far is that gap? How big is that gap? If you can bring that together, like, man, I'm good at writing and I kind of like it, but man, over a year or two of doing it, now I really like it. Okay, that's a recipe for success. And that's, I think, what's made a lot of athletes successful too. That, I'm good at weightlifting, or I'm good at running, or I'm good at hockey, or I'm good at basketball, and I kind of like it. But because I'm good at it, I do it a lot. I do it every day, and I start to get positive feedback from it. I'm winning awards or winning championships or titles, or I'm better than other athletes, or I'm getting praise from coaches or followers or fans or supporters or competitors. Okay, now I like it. It's something I'm naturally good at, and now I like. And so those are some approaches I think that they carry over into other areas of life as well: business, relationships, projects that one may or may not pursue. And so start there and see where it takes you.
So, looking plant-based athlete, how did this come about? Was it always something you wanted to create? Because obviously you've had books in the past, but this is something else. This is massive. Is this something you always wanted to create? Was it just something, or it was just the opportunity arose and you just took it? Why are you good?
Well, there's actually a story behind it. And I'll try to be brief, because I'm certainly not. I'm not succinct in any fashion whatsoever. In fact, I just submitted an article for a popular website that was 5,000 words, and they said, "Can you make it 500?" It was 25 Microsoft Word pages, spaced, double spaced, and they wanted it to be like 3 pages, not 25 pages. So brevity is not my strong point. But here's the real story, Callum. Here's the real story. And I've shared it on a few podcasts, and most people don't know it. So I self-published Vegan Bodybuilding 2010. Traveled around, was literally sleeping in my car all over the United States because I couldn't even afford a motel. I was selling books out of my trunk of my car, giving talks around the country, trying to make it. And I really struggled, and essentially almost gave up. This is not working. I was just in my car out in some field probably, or some side of the road in Tennessee, and was just ready to throw in the towel, and I posted some kind of, dark and depressing thing on Facebook that my lifelong dream had failed and was crumbling and all this stuff. And a few friends reached out, to kind of pick me back up. And I eventually allowed that book to be acquired by a publisher, and they took it over from there. And then I had this idea for the plant-based athlete in 2013, and I pitched it. Maybe the idea came before that, but that was even the title, the Plant-Based Athlete, 2013. And I pitched it to an agent, a literary agent I met. It was one of those exciting moments. It was on the 25th floor of a building in Beverly Hills, California, and it was really exciting and all this stuff. And the agent was impressed by my concept and all of that. And so I went back home and wrote the proposal. I worked on the proposal with 2 friends who were PhD candidates, very smart people. I submitted the proposal. It was, I think, 43 pages long. And the agent called me, and he hated it. He said, "It's not good. It's not the way you described it in person. It's dry. It's not exciting." I was bored, and I didn't know how to take criticism very well, or constructive feedback back then. I was just so passionate about what I was doing, and I wanted people to believe in what I was doing too. So he said, "Here's what you need to do. You've got to come up with about $10,000 to hire someone to fix this proposal for you, and then about $60,000 to hire a writer, a ghostwriter, and they'll write this book for you or with you, and it'll just be a home run." And so I said, I didn't want to do that, but I said, fine. So I went home and I started writing this book, this vegan fitness book. That was designed to be about a 60-page ebook, so I could sell and make some money, so I could hire a writer to help me with the proposal for the Plant-Based Athlete book. But what happened was that 60-page ebook turned into a 350-page book that would be shredded. That I thought of one random day, that title, Shred It, and it sold, it's self-published it, and it sold over 20,000 copies. Do the math, hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue, and became, this popular book, endorsed by some of the biggest names in our entire industry. I mean, even Phil Collins from Def Leppard, and Emily Deschanel is an actress, and Dr. T. Colin Campbell, and Rich Roll, and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and Rip Esselstyn, and Kathy Freston, and these huge names, all in a self-published book that sold tens of thousands of copies and made hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I decided, well, maybe I don't need this agent or need this thing. And that, along with a few other things, helped me buy a house for the first time. And it was all because I was put in this position to prove myself, because I wasn't good enough. And then I met Vanessa Espinoza, who became my training partner. We met totally randomly at a gym where she recognized me, and we hit it off. And we decided to self-publish a book, Plant-Based Muscle, together. And that book, did fairly well, not quite as well as Shred It, but it did fairly well. And then I was on a speaking tour I was in Arizona, Southern Arizona. I lived in Phoenix, but I was 2 hours south in Tucson. And I got a phone call from the guy who had initially introduced me to that first agent in Beverly Hills. And now that I had these self-published books that were doing well, he said, he invited me to dinner. He was visiting from Los Angeles, California, and invited me to dinner. We sat down at dinner at this Ethiopian restaurant, that vegan-friendly Ethiopian restaurant. And he said, how would you like to try the New York publishing route again? This was 5 years later. It was 2018 now. I said, I think I'm ready. I've self-published the 3 print books, plus that ebook I wrote in 6 days. I had 4 books under my belt. And he said, you know what? I've got this new agent, a great agent. I'd like to put you in touch with her. And so he did. And by the way, this individual that I'm talking about, who set me up with both agents, is the creator and founder of Forks Over Knives, Brian Wendell.
Wow.
And he was looking out for me. He wanted me to be successful on a larger scale than just my self-published books. So I thought he's going to put me in touch with his agent at some point. I didn't know it was going to be like that day. And so I was stressing out and all this stuff. And I even spent like 2 hours on my email that I would reply to her in this introduction email. And so we decided I would bring back this idea of the plant-based athlete, which was in the original proposal the same. It was telling the compelling stories of the world's greatest plant-based athletes. But now, Callum, we were right on the verge of the Game Changers coming out. There were so many more plant-based athletes now than there were before in 2013. And there was probably a good reason why that book wasn't accepted then, when we only had like me and Brendan Brazier and Scott Jurek and a few people to talk about. We're now half a decade later, all these superstar athletes. And then of course, the Game Changers would come out a year later in 2019 and pave the way and open some opportunities. And so I pitched the book to this agent, and she only worked with major book deals like Forks Over Knives, which is obviously very, very popular books. And she liked the concept, but once again, she said, "You're not good enough on your own." And I've been hearing that my whole adult life as a writer. You're not good enough. You're not good enough, man. So she said, "You need a co-author, someone who's more successful, sold more books, has a bigger following." So I sat down with Brian at the Forks Over Knives office, and I said, "Man, I think Matt Frazier is the guy from No Meat Athlete. I've known him for 10 years. We've been good friends. I've endorsed all of his books. He's endorsed all of mine. He's an endurance athlete. I'm a strength athlete. He runs nomeatathlete.com. I run veganbodybuilding.com. We get endurance athletes. We get strength and bodybuilding athletes and everyone in between. And we're both connected to different celebrities and influencers. And we both have newsletters and all of this stuff." And so I flew out to the East Coast and met with Matt in person. I didn't tell him why I was coming, but we just went for a walk along the Atlantic Ocean out in Florida, where we were at the time, at a health conference that I knew he was going to be attending. And I pitched this idea to him, and he said, "Let's do it. Let's do it." And we decided on that day that we are going to make the New York Times bestseller list. We're going to combine our efforts, combine our powers, combine our skills, and we are going to write one of the best-selling books in the world. And it's going to be about being a plant-based athlete. And so that's what we did. So this book has been almost a decade in the making, and people forget about it. I'm glad you asked about it, because I haven't told that story very often at all, and probably not in this depth or detail ever before, because people think, oh, maybe you just got the idea because of the Game Changers, or maybe it was the timing was right, or maybe someone came to me. No one came to me. I had to work like crazy to convince them to even give me a shot. even though Brian gave a testimonial about me to the agent that I was, capable or talented, it still took a lot of work to be given that opportunity. And so that's the real story behind the plant-based athlete, which is another reason why it's so meaningful that it did do well, because I was told so many times that I wasn't good enough and that I always needed more help, and to hire writers and to have co-authors and to have people helping me along the way. And they were right. And obviously Matt brought a lot to the book as well. Maybe they were right. And I'm still discovering that. If I've got what it takes to be a solo author with a new book, with a major publisher, and that's to be determined. I'm still not there yet, and hopefully one day that opportunity will present itself, and I'm working toward that, including one of the reasons why I visited 100 bookstores in the last month to build relationships with staff and stores around the country to position myself to earn that opportunity. And so that quest continues. And so we'll see what the future brings.
With that constant grind as well, you absolutely smashed it, because it's just, after hearing that story as well, because I think most people would assume it is just kind of, you did see obviously Game Changers came about, you're like, let's piggyback on the back of that and just kind of go with it. But to hear that in-depth story is just remarkable. I'm very grateful for you to tell me that. That's it was a long journey, and obviously I published 4 books before the Game Changers came out, and I was already doing my thing. But I interviewed James Wilkes. He's in the book. The guy who created Scott, all who appeared in the Game Changers. They're in the book. Their stories, because I wanted to honor and appreciate that paving of the road that they did do, because that absolutely, unquestionably helped with us landing a book deal, because the publisher was more confident knowing that the Game Changers became one of the most watched documentaries in history, and that there's probably a bigger market now because they opened that door. So I'm grateful for James and Joseph and their staff and their team over at the Game Changers who endorsed and supported the book. Like, when I landed the book deal, which was a dream come true. I mean, when you land a book deal, it's a pretty significant thing. It's a lot different. And I know from firsthand experience, it's a lot different than self-publishing or getting your book acquired by a small publisher. But when a big New York publishing house like HarperCollins, the world's oldest and second largest book publisher, says we want to offer you a book deal, that's one of the biggest days of your life, if that's what your dream and goal is. And James Wilkes was one of the very first people that I told, bar none, aside from probably my mom, my dad. I reached out to James and just said, hey man, thank you. Like, I probably wouldn't be here landing this major New York book deal without the Game Changers. So thank you. And his response was congratulations. It wasn't like any kind of competitiveness or jealousy or envy. He had already obviously become a big star, and his film was incredible and achieved all kinds of accolades. And he was just congratulating me for continuing that conversation in a literary form, where they did theirs on the big screen. I did mine in a hardcover book, an audiobook and digital book. And it's all for the same, all fighting for the same cause, to bring awareness of a compassionate plant-based diet and vegan lifestyle that has the ability to make a significant impact on animals, people, and the environment. And that's why we're doing it. And that's something that I'm really proud of. And I also want to be clear, I wouldn't have made this without my co-author, Matt Frazier. If he hadn't agreed to work with me, I don't know who I would have gotten to work with me, if anybody. And maybe this would still be on the shelf, and I'd be doing these self-published books to raise money to hire people to help me, which is what I was told over and over. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for Brian Wendell. I mean, I wouldn't be here without him from Forks Over Knives, and our agent, who eventually took a chance on me after a few tries of trying to convince her. And for people like you who've given me a platform to talk about it, to tell the real story, like the real reason why
this book came about, and the story behind it, and how it's already changing the lives of people around the world, therefore are also very likely changing the lives of animals around the world who are viewed differently now because of the way people interpreted the book. And so I appreciate you as well.
When we obviously you're sharing these amazing athletes, and it's such a supportive community as well, did you have to be, I'm guessing by the end, very picky about who you were sticking in the book? Because I'm guessing you must have conducted thousands of interviews with, like, because obviously there's so many athletes in here, but there must be some that just didn't make the cut as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it wasn't thousands. I wish it were, that I interviewed. But it was, I mean, there were hundreds on my list, but there were 60 that I actually interviewed, and about 30 that made the book. And there were a bunch of people, including, good friends of mine like Nimai Delgado that I could have interviewed, or Patrick Baboumian, but I just chose not to, because I didn't want too many people from the Game Changers. I didn't want people to feel like, oh, this book is too similar to the Game Changers, or I already know their stories. And those individuals and others already had a pretty good following. Their message is already getting out there. Nimai, Patrick Baboumian, Lewis Hamilton, Novak Djokovic, like, they're already pretty famous, or really famous. Their stories out there.
Huge platforms as well.
Yeah, big platforms, millions of followers in some cases. What I wanted to do was to shed light and give a platform and a voice and an opportunity to the athletes who have been paving the way for a very long time, who are underappreciated, underacknowledged, who are in many cases the best in the world at what they do, and they don't get the attention. And in some cases, some of these athletes have been vegan since birth. There are some people that I interviewed who've been vegan since birth and won a world championship, one of them. Another one won an Olympic medal. One of them became an IFBB pro bodybuilder, all vegan since birth. And I thought that was important to tell those stories. And also, I wanted to talk about people like Fiona Oakes, who's been plant-based vegan for 50 years, and has multiple Guinness World Records. And Laura Klein, who won the duathlete world championships, who's been vegan for 15 or 20 years. And Christine Barteros, who's been a professional cyclist and ranked number 6 in the world, and who's been vegan for more than 20 years. And Scott Jurek, who's one of the greatest runners in the history of the world. And yes, he was featured in the Game Changers, and he wrote his own New York Times bestselling books. But I wanted to include him because he's one of the greatest runners that the planet has ever seen. And he's been plant-based since the 90s. I wanted some of those stories to be told, as well as like Andreas Wojta. Maybe people have never even heard that name before. He's an Olympic runner from Austria who's plant-based, and people like Orla Walsh, who's a national record holder in track cycling and has a very interesting background. I think her story was the longest one in the book, actually. Very interesting backstory of like drug and alcohol addiction and fast food addiction, all this, and then becoming a national champion, the best in her entire country in her sport. And her story was, very similar to Dotsie Bausch, who they both started their careers very late. They both had drug addiction. They both had poor lifestyle habits. They both became major champions. Dotsie, an Olympic medalist, of course. Orla Walsh, a national champion. And also, as you can probably tell, I've been talking about a lot of female athletes here too. The bodybuilder I was referring to was Jahina Malik, who's been vegan since birth, and obviously Christine and Fiona, and there's Sharon Feichman, who has a great story. She just competed in Tokyo at the Olympics in the Summer Games in tennis, representing Canada. And I really wanted to include as many female plant-based athletes as possible, because I think they're often underrepresented. We talk a lot about, the big time male vegan athletes, but there's some incredible female plant-based athletes. I also wrote about Natalie Matthews and Vanessa Espinoza and Harriet Davis and Mary Schneider and so many others, because of what they've been able to accomplish, and maybe they haven't always had the spotlight that they deserve. And so that was part of it. So yes, I had to make some difficult decisions. There were some of my best friends I left out of the book, even knowing this book was going to be one of the most popular books in the world if we did it right. Like, we knew it was going to be a New York Times bestseller. We just believed it. We knew that it was going to be a big hit. And I still had to leave some of my best friends out because there were just other compelling stories that I thought were, in my own decision making, more important to tell. And so it was difficult. And so some athletes I just mentioned by name, just kind of briefly, like Lewis Hamilton or Novak Djokovic or like Chris Paul or JaVale McGee or Diana Taurasi, or some of these great major mega superstars who have big followings and are in major professional sports. But part of the goal was to balance it out based on diversity, interviewing and featuring athletes from around the globe, from different genders and different backgrounds, different ages. In fact, some of my favorite stories in the book are the athletes over 50. They're incredible. They're like, some of them are world record holders, like Rip Esselstyn, who set a record recently, and Rich Roll, who's inspired so many people, and Christine Barteros and Fiona Oakes and John Joseph and these other athletes over 50. Those stories are fun for me. I'm in my 40s now. It's like something that gives me motivation. Like I could aspire to be really fit and continue my athletic journey well beyond my 50s, a decade from now. So yeah, picking who to interview and who to feature was tough. And some people were just better interviews than others too. There were some athletes I really wanted to write more about, but I just couldn't get it out of them in the interview. And so we had to go with some other athletes who just gave much more material for me to work with.
It did open my eyes to such a huge amount of different athletes that I didn't realize even existed. So like Christine Barteros, had no idea she existed, but then looking her up afterwards, I'm like, she's extraordinary.
Yeah. And David Verberg, who's heard of him? He was one of the fastest people on the planet. He won an Olympic gold medal in sprinting for Team USA in the relay. One of the fastest people on the planet. I've met him in person multiple times, I think, and kept in touch with him. He's plant-based, but people don't know about him, And so being able to tell those kinds of stories was something really, really fun for me. And there were also some stories that we just couldn't quite fit in, like Heather Mitz and Rebecca Soni, because they became plant-based after they won all their Olympic medals. But as they reflect back on their Olympic careers, and they're plant-based now, they're vegan now, they identify as such today, they think that they would have done things differently back then. But the reality is, the fact is, they won their Olympic medals as omnivores. And so they got cut out of the book, even though I wrote their stories. So there are a bunch of stories that were written that, that didn't quite make it in, even if they were like trying to tell a story about where they are now in their lives and their plant-based careers and all of that. But their major achievements were, attained with a different diet. So those didn't make it in. So there were stories like that, but I'm glad that you had the opportunity to discover different people and learn, like Josh Lajani has a great story. Corinne Sutton has a great story. There are, it's hard to pick favorites, but there's 30 detailed stories. And then there's a bunch of quotes or little excerpts from those, the other 30 interviews that I did. People like Kevin and Shonda Hill, Cam Awesome, some world champion boxers and other Olympic athletes. Julia Murray, of course, former Olympic skier from Canada, and so a lot of those stories, and then also again being able to highlight my buddy Vanessa Espinoza, who's still one of the greatest athletes I've ever known, and I've known a lot of great athletes. Her story and the role that she had in my life, rekindling my bodybuilding career and co-authoring a book with me, all the while maintaining her status as she was an All-American basketball player, drafted into the WNBA, a 3-time Colorado Golden Gloves state boxing champion, and almost set a world record in her very first powerlifting meet and competed in powerlifting at the Olympia. She is just as good as it gets, and 3 different sports and excelling at the highest level in all of them. It's just been really, really inspiring, and being able to tell that story is fun for me too.
I do think though that one of my biggest takeaways that I got from this book was realizing that there is no wrong or right way to focus on what you're eating with athletic performance. But some of these people are still consuming a lot of like ice creams, brownies, meat alternatives. And obviously when we think of like really high performing people in their fields, we think, oh, really clean diet. Whereas there's some of them just eating all sorts. And I'm just like, oh, I don't always have to focus on whole foods when you're seeing some of these athletes performing at the highest, and they're still chowing down on like Beyond Burgers. And I'm just like, oh, yeah. So I can still achieve things while eating what I want.
Well, that's what I think is a little bit of a misconception. And maybe even as a result of even some of my articles or books that I've written in the past, that there's this perception that you have to eat as cleanly as possible. I mean, do you think LeBron James does that? You think that Tom Brady does that? You think, yeah, maybe some of these guys focus on their nutrition and all that kind of stuff. But no, I mean, some of the greatest athletes in the world. I mean, we all know like Michael Phelps' story, right? Of eating like 10,000 calories of tons of junk food. And he was maybe the greatest Olympian in the history of Olympics, period. I mean, just based on number of medals won and all of that, I think he's one of the most decorated athletes to ever walk the earth. And so, yeah, you talk about like guys like Nick Squires, who's a California state record holder in powerlifting. We wrote about him in the book. We have this day in the life routine, I think you're referring to, where it shows all these different athletes, like 20 something different athletes, their entire day, like what they eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, supplements, what their workouts look like, and even a few other things throughout the day, like their recovery, they use like, you know, foam roller, sauna, hot tub, sports massage, meditation, whatever. And yeah, you will find that athletes of all types are eating a very diverse diet. And that's one thing that we discovered. And we were trying to be authentic with that and true, and have this like accurate portrayal of what athletes are really doing. And that's how it is, you know. And I found that for myself as well, that I went through periods like when I wrote the book Shred It, where I was just eating only whole foods, you know, and I did find myself, I found some success with it, of course. Body fat percentage was lower. My strength was good. I looked, you know, in really good shape and all this stuff, but I was also hungry. A lot of the times I wasn't quite as satiated or didn't feel quite as fulfilled because the calorie density was not there, which you'll get from some of the processed foods or refined foods or oils added to noodle dishes or you know, these burgers or sandwiches and wraps and all this stuff, fried rice, pad thai. And then I realized a lot of those are my favorite foods too, you know, and that it's okay that I eat those processed foods. I still eat pad thai and fried rice and burgers and sandwiches and all that. And I just spend maybe a little bit extra time burning that off through walking the dogs or doing a little bit extra cardio at the gym, or having, you know, extending my workout from 1 hour to an hour and 15 minutes, something like that, to help burn off some of those calories, or walking up and down stairs at home, those types of things. So that was eye-opening, I think, for a lot of us, that when you look at, because you look at these athletes, right? You say, okay, this is someone we look up to. They're an Olympic champion or something, or they're a world champion athlete, you know, a popular name, or somebody we saw in the Game Changers. And we were like, man, they must have this perfect diet. It must be completely dialed in, must be fine-tuned and all that. And the reality is that it's not. I mean, Michael Jordan wasn't eating that great of a diet, and he's still arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time, particularly in basketball, of course. But look at anybody, look at any, like Ronaldo or some of the more popular athletes around the world in any sport. They're not always following as optimal of a diet as possible, because what we're finding out, I think, is that optimal is very hard to attain. It's very stressful to attain. It's very difficult. It's very hard to uphold. It's a standard that leads to this idea of perfection, which is a form of stress and anxiety. It's almost impossible to achieve. And to allow some flexibility in one's diet, even as a bodybuilder, even as a physical, like, appearance-based athlete, there's room for that kind of flexibility. And I think that's something that I believe will be a strong takeaway. So thank you for pointing that out.
Did you test out any of the days in the lives of other athletes and yourself? Because I know I went and tested out all of Rip's recipes in I think it's the black beans, the chili, and rib stick bowl in one day, and I've never felt so alive. Like, no wonder it's still smashing records. I've never felt so alive after eating his kind of 3 meals during one day.
Well, you know what? I haven't actually tried that. I've observed, I've reviewed, I wrote them all out. I looked at them. I was inspired by some more than others, but I haven't actually tried it. So perhaps I should, because I look up to a lot of these guys. You know, Rip being one of them. He's a great mentor for me, and I've spent a fair amount of time with him over the last 10 or 12 years. And Corinne Sutton, who I look up to so much. I mean, here's a guy who's won, in the book, I think I wrote 19 or 20 bodybuilding titles. He's now won like 23. I mean, I only won twice. I won 2 times as a vegan bodybuilder. He's finished first place like 23 times as a vegan bodybuilder. And he just has this, and I've been on tour with him. We travel to a lot of events together, where we speak on stage together and work at a booth together with Vegan Strong. And you know, we spent a decent amount of time together, and he's so disciplined and dedicated. Like I'm inspired by that, you know? And then there's another section in the book about the grocery shopping list, right? There's this, so what do these athletes shop for? Like Vanessa Espinoza, one of the pound for pound, one of the strongest athletes in the world, or an Olympic athlete like Julia Murray, or someone I haven't mentioned yet, although I definitely should. Sonia Looney, who's a world champion mountain biker. She's about to have her second baby now. And she has her grocery shopping suggestions there as someone who is the best in the world in her sport. And then Matt and I also contribute ours. Like that's like, it's insightful, you know, it's insightful to look at that kind of stuff, because someone like Vanessa, I just saw 3 days ago, I think. Yeah, I saw Vanessa 3 days ago. She lives about an hour away from me here in Colorado, where we both live these days. And I'm just constantly inspired by her nutritional approach and her discipline and dedication. And it's just awesome. And so I'm hoping those resources are intriguing to other people. And I appreciate that concept, Callum. I've never thought about that, of like trying a day in the life of such and such athlete. I hadn't thought about that.
I think it was Rips I tried. I think I did a few of Dotsies as well, and I think Rips really just kind of changed how I felt in the day completely. I was just like, wow, this is something new. But yeah, I've gone through actually quite a few of the recipes now. I think going on maybe half the recipes. Wow. Yeah, and some of them are amazing. Some of them are absolutely amazing. So now that you've released Plant-Based Athlete, so what's the next step in your journey? Like, will there be another book? Is there another exciting project coming up?
Yeah. I've got to figure out how to answer that. So yes, I kind of slightly alluded to a solo book project, right? Half an hour ago or whenever it was. And, you know, I hate to sound like a broken record, but, and I've never talked about this. In fact, a lot of people don't even, 99% of people don't know I'm working on something. Members of my family don't even know, I think, but I'm okay to talk about it now, because I've been talking about it when I go to bookstores, when they ask me the same thing. So what's next? And so I've been hearing that same old broken record. I wrote a proposal and just was told it wasn't good enough. So I wrote another one, and that one got rejected too. So it's territory I've been in before. It's not the end of the road, obviously. That was just given particular feedback, and I tried to apply it to the best of my ability. And these proposals are about, one was 55 pages, then the follow-up one was 60 pages. And they just haven't fully resonated with my agent or publisher yet. And and I was told the same thing. They loved aspects of it. In fact, the publisher said, I wish I could quote, I don't have it in front of me. I wish I could quote it. She said, Robert, this is the best idea or best concept I've seen in years, which gives me a lot of confidence. But she said, it's just not for us at this publisher. Like it's it's for another imprint, another publisher. It's just not the type of book that we publish. So that was very encouraging. But my agent said, the same thing, that Robert, it's just not something you can do on your own. You need another co-author. So that's the latest. I heard that just I don't know, a week ago or so, and so I've been considering that. So maybe they're right. Maybe I need to go collaborate with somebody, and maybe at age 45 I'll be ready to do it on my own, or age 50. I certainly wanted to do that because of the nature of the particular book, and I won't say the topic or the concept of it, but it's one that is a concept that's typically written by one person, a little bit first person, a little bit memoir type approach. Like it wouldn't totally make sense with a co-author, but that's what my agent seems to think that I need. So that's what I'm working on. And I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. If for most people, I guess, to make it as an author, you've got to go through a lot of those rejections. And I certainly had that even before that plant-based athlete rejection in California. I had other book proposals dating back to 2008 that I pitched and weren't accepted. And so it's a journey. It takes time, and it takes learning and absorbing feedback and making changes and being open and listening and trying to make something that is what the agent or publisher is interested in publishing. And so I'm still working at it, and hopefully I'll get there. I think I will. I'm pretty determined, and I tend to bounce back, and I'm just going to keep doing my thing. And in the meantime, I'm writing more articles, and I'm honing my craft that way. I'm getting more practice as a writer, and I'm still visiting bookstores. Like I told you, I was signing books yesterday, and I'll be signing books tomorrow. It's snowing right now, but if the snow stops, I'll be signing books tomorrow and the next day, and I'll keep on keeping on. So that's my roundabout answer of what's next. I hope it's another book, but it's to be determined.
Forward to it if it when it comes out at one point. I'm guessing with the mindset you've got as well, that it will eventually turn up, it will appear, and it will be great.
I hope so too, and I appreciate that.
So we're going to wrap this up in a second, but before we go, I ask everybody everybody that's on the podcast, I ask them, if you had a long day, like you come home, you're starving, and you want something quick, you want something easy, and you want something nutritious, what are you making?
I'm already, like, as you were describing it, I already pictured it. It's a burrito bowl for me. I mean, long day, I'm hungry, I want something heavy, filling, probably something hot, depending on the time of year. So I want rice and beans and avocado and lettuce, tomato. It can be in a burrito in the wrap, or it can be a burrito in the bowl. And in fact, that's probably what I'm going to have after we wrap up this podcast today. It's about 12:30 in the afternoon where I am. It's lunchtime, and I've just had some bananas and water today, as I've been, working in the morning, and so I think that's my answer. If I had to say a second one, it would be Thai food. It would be a noodle dish. It'd be a pad Thai. It'd be a fried rice. It would be like, and I know that because that's what I do on these long days when I'm going around on tour and I'm in some city like Los Angeles or San Diego or Phoenix or Vegas. I'm like, okay, man, it's been a long day. I'm hungry. What am I going to go for? It's either burrito or a big Thai bowl of some sort. So I think my answers are based on my experience.
To be fair, I do love a burrito, and that sounds absolutely incredible, to be fair. So where can we find you?
So a funny question, as I've talked so not so favorably about social media, but I am still there. Really just look up Robert Cheeke. You'll find me. There's an E on the end of my last name. So when you look that up on whether it's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or the internet at large, you'll find me. I run veganbodybuilding.com. I don't do a whole lot with it these days, after running that website for 20 years. I don't do a whole lot with it. I'm mostly on social media, communicating when I am communicating. And so you can just look me up by name, and you'll probably find me, and I'll either be there or I'll be on a hiatus and taking a break, but I'll see you when I get back.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm very grateful for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Callum. I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing with your community and getting the message out there of compassion and of health and wellness and of following your own fitness dreams and health goals and making those happen. So thank you for all the great work that you do as well.